Imagine a room where no mortal has been allowed to enter for centuries, under pain of agonizing death. A place where, according to legend, God himself resides. What happens if a cynical conqueror, spitting on prohibitions, tears down this veil? In the 63rd year before Christ, the Roman general Gnaeus Pompey the Great committed perhaps the most fatal mistake in the history of antiquity. He stepped into the Holy of Holies of the Jerusalem temple. He was looking for untold treasures there, but what he found, or rather, what he didn't find, started the countdown of his life. In this video, you will learn how one brazen step turned a favorite of fortune into an outcast hunted by the whole world. We will tell you why the richest man in Rome ended his days as a bloody prop in someone else's theatrical production, and why, according to rumors, molten gold was poured down his dead throat. You will see how the most monstrous political alliance in history was created, and how it devoured its creators. Why did the man who wore the cloak of Alexander the Great end up abandoned on a rotten boat with a knife in his back, while his severed head became a gift that made even Julius Caesar recoil in horror? This is not just a story of a civil war. It is a chronicle of the fall of a man who thought he had grabbed God by the beard, but in the end was left alone with a terrifying void. Watch until the end to understand, does a curse capable of grinding even the world's greatest rulers into dust actually exist? Imagine the silence, not the kind you find in a library or an empty house, but a ringing, heavy silence that presses on the eardrums harder than the roar of siege engines. The 63rd year before Christ, Jerusalem. The air is thick with the smell of burning, old blood and expensive incense. Look at these sandals, Roman caligae studded with iron. They step on mosaics where for centuries only the bare feet of priests have walked. Gnaeus Pompey, called the Great, the man who wiped pirates and the kings of the East off the map, stands before a giant curtain. Behind him is chaos. Legionaries with torches, their hands still slippery with the blood of the temple's defenders. They exchange glances. There is no triumph in their eyes. There is fear, animal, primal terror. They know. Behind this curtain lives a god whose name cannot be spoken. A god who, according to rumors, incinerates the insolent with lightning. But Pompey does not look back. He looks only forward, at the purple fabric separating the world of men from the Holy of Holies. Could you take that step? Imagine that not just your life, but your immortal soul is at stake. Romans are a superstitious people. They believe in omens, in the flight of birds, in the liver of a sacrificial bull. But here, in the heart of Judea, the general's cynicism defeats the man's fear.
Pompey doesn't care. He didn't come to pray. He came to take inventory.
He needs to know to whom these strange people sacrifice mountains of gold. A sharp movement of the hand. The fabric, heavy and embroidered with gold, flies aside with a rustle. Torches snatch the space from the darkness. And right here, time stops. What did he expect to see? An idol with a statue's head? A golden calf? A donkey's head, as they whispered in the dirty taverns of Rome? He, the conqueror of Asia, was used to gods being marble, bronze, gold. Gods must have a face so the winner can spit in it, or take it back to Rome, chained to a chariot. But there is nothing there. Absolute. Gaping. Void. There are no statues, no images, no throne in the room. Only stone and darkness. Pompey freezes. For the first time in his life, the great conqueror feels deceived. For a Roman pragmatist, this is absurd. A god who is not physically present cannot exist. Is this a joke? No. It is a blow scarier than a sword. In this empty room,
Pompey encounters something his legions cannot pierce with pilums: an idea. The silence of the Holy of Holies is deafening. Only the heavy breathing of the soldiers behind him and the crackle of torches can be heard. In this moment, something irreversible happens. Historians will later write hundreds of scrolls trying to explain why, from this day on, luck turned away from Pompey. Why his famous felicitas, the supernatural luck that led him from victory to victory, suddenly vanished like smoke in the wind. Look at his face in this moment. There is no fear. There is contempt mixed with bewilderment. Is that it? His gaze reads. You died by the thousands for this emptiness. He doesn't understand. He doesn't see that the void before him is a mirror in which his own future is already reflected. A headless body on the Egyptian sand, the betrayal of friends, the collapse of the republic he swore to defend. It is here, in the semi-darkness of the Jerusalem temple, that Pompey signs his own death warrant. He found no treasures here to melt down into coins to pay veterans. He found no idol to drag along the Via Sacra. He found only cold metaphysics, against which his Roman rationalism shattered. Suetonius and Plutarch will be restrained in their descriptions, but you and I understand. This was a moment of the greatest sacrilege, not because he entered the room, but because he came out the same. He didn't fall to his knees, he wasn't struck by thunder. The heavens remained silent, and that silence was more terrifying than any curse. The higher powers didn't dirty their hands right then. They simply started a timer. Tick-tock, tick-tock. Pompey turns around. He throws a short phrase to his officers, something cynical about the strange customs of barbarians, and steps out into the light. He thinks he is the winner. He thinks he captured Jerusalem. The fool. Jerusalem captured him. The shadow of the Holy of Holies now lies on his shoulders, like an invisible mantle heavier than lead. The soldiers exhale with relief. The general is alive. Lightning didn't strike. That means their gods are stronger. They can continue looting. But an attentive observer would notice how the centurion's hands are trembling, how they avoid looking into the black hole of the passage their commander opened. They feel what Pompey refuses to admit. The rules of the game have changed. The old world, understandable and material, where might makes right, has cracked. This invasion was not just a military episode. It was a philosophical crash test of the ancient world. The Roman sword against the Jewish spirit, matter against the unseen. And although the legions stood firm, the foundation under Pompey's feet had already turned to sand. He left the temple a victor, but the gods had already cast the lots, and they did not fall in his favor. Irony of fate. The man who came to take the gold left his soul in that room. And the gold. The gold, of course, was there, mountains of gold. But it will no longer bring him happiness. From this moment, every victory of his will taste of ash. Every ally will become a traitor. Every step will bring him not closer to the pinnacle of power, but to that very void he saw behind the curtain. But he doesn't know this yet. He walks out into the temple courtyard, where his boots slide on a slurry of blood and wine. The sun of Judea blinds his eyes after the temple's gloom. He is Gnaeus Pompey Magnus, the Great, the favorite of fortune. In his hands is the fate of the East. He is sure he controls the chaos. But the chaos is already inside him. However, to understand the full depth of this scene, we need to rewind the tape. After all, Pompey didn't end up here by accident. He wasn't just walking by and decided to drop in on Yahweh. This was the finale of a bloody, dirty, and incredibly convoluted drama that the Jews themselves directed to their own detriment. Romans don't go where they aren't invited, or, more accurately, where the door isn't opened for them from the inside. While Pompey wipes the dust of the Holy of Holies off his armor, let's see how the legions ended up at the walls of the Eternal City in the first place, and why the brothers, heirs to the Judean throne, decided that inviting a Roman wolf into the sheepfold was a great idea for resolving family disputes. History teaches us one cruel truth. When two fight for a crown, the winner is the third one watching the fight. In Judea of the 1st century before Christ, brothers Hyrcanus and Aristobulus decided to play a game of thrones. They hated each other, with that special, suffocating hatred only close relatives are capable of. One was weak, lethargic, a puppet in the hands of courtiers. The other was ambitious, hot-tempered, ready to burn the country down just to rule over the ashes. And what do? They make a fatal mistake. They call an arbiter. And not just a neighbor, but Rome. Imagine two sheep arguing over the best patch of grass and deciding to invite a wolf to judge them. Gnaeus Pompey at this moment is sitting in Damascus like a spider in the center of a web. He has just redrawn the map of the Middle East. He doesn't need their excuses, their sacred rites, or genealogical trees. He needs control, taxes, and glory. Ambassadors from both brothers come to him. They carry gold, lots of gold, talent after talent. Pompey takes money from both. Why not? The Roman pocket is bottomless. But he places his bet on Hyrcanus, not because he is right, but because he is weak. Rome doesn't need strong allies. Rome needs obedient vassals. Aristobulus, realizing he has been betrayed, or rather outplayed, panics and locks himself in Jerusalem. The trap snaps shut. What began as a diplomatic mission turns into one of the most cynical sieges in the history of antiquity. Look at Jerusalem through the eyes of a Roman engineer. It's a nightmare. The city is surrounded by deep ravines, the walls are high, and the Temple Mount is a fortress inside a fortress. To take it by storm means losing half a legion, and Pompey protects his soldiers. He is not a butcher, he is a surgeon. He needs a victory with little bloodshed, and here, cold, calculating intellect enters the stage. Pompey observes. He sees a peculiarity in the defenders' behavior. Every 7th day, something amazing happens on the walls. Silence. The Jews don't shoot, don't make sorties, don't interfere with the Romans' work. Shabbat, the holy day of rest. Their law forbids attacking on Saturday, although it allows defense if there is a direct threat to life. This was a gift from the heavens for Roman cynicism. Pompey finds a cheat code for this war. He orders his soldiers. On Saturday, we don't attack. We don't storm the walls. We don't kill. We just build. Imagine this surreal picture. Saturday morning, a sweltering haze over Jerusalem. Bearded defenders stand on the walls and look down. And below, work is in full swing. Romans are hauling earth, logs, stones. They are piling up a giant ramp right opposite the most vulnerable part of the wall. Winches creak, hammers bang, Latin and Greek curses of the overseers are heard. And not a single arrow from the wall. Not a single stone. The Jews watch as their death becomes a meter higher with every hour. But they cannot break the commandment. They cannot attack the builders, because formally the builders aren't attacking them. It is the bureaucracy of death. Pompey uses the enemy's piety as a weapon against them. Week after week, every Saturday, the siege ramp crawls upward until it is level with the towers. Siege engines roll up close. The battering rams begin their monotonous song. Blows shake the hills. Bam! Bam! It is the sound of inevitability. The assault begins in the 3rd month of the siege, on the day when, ironically, the Jews were again observing a fast day. The Romans breach the wall. Faustus Cornelius Sulla, the son of the dictator Sulla himself, is the first to climb the wall. His father's blood plays in the son's veins. Legionaries burst inside like a flow of lava. The massacre begins. But not a normal battle where steel clangs against steel. This is a slaughter. The defenders, exhausted by hunger and internal strife, since Hyrcanus's supporters inside the city helped the Romans open the gates, die by the thousands. Historians speak of 12,000 killed Jews. Roman losses? Negligible. But the most terrible thing happens not on the walls. The camera shifts to the center of the temple, to the altar. There, amidst smoke and screams, the priests continue the service. They don't run.
They don't grab swords. They methodically, with frightening calm, perform rituals. They pour oil, burn incense, recite prayers. A Roman legionary, bursting into the inner courtyard, sees before him not a warrior, but a man in white robes who doesn't even turn his head as death approaches him. A strike of the gladius. The priest falls, but the next one immediately takes his place. They are slaughtered like cattle. The blood of men mixes with the blood of sacrificial animals. Bodies fall onto the sacred fire, and the smell of burning human flesh mixes with the scent of frankincense. It is a scene of absolute apocalypse. For the Romans, this is madness, fanaticism that boggles the mind. Why die for a ritual? But for these people, the temple is more important than life. Aristobulus is captured. He is shackled in chains to later be led through the streets of Rome. Hyrcanus gets his crown, but now he is not a king.
He is a high priest and ethnarch, a pathetic viceroy of Rome, obligated to pay tribute. Judea loses its cities, access to the sea, and freedom. The independent Hasmonean kingdom ceases to exist. It turns into a provincial appendage of the Republic. Pompey stands in the middle of this bloody mess. He is pleased. The task is complete. A strategic bridgehead is captured. The treasury will be replenished. A triumph is secured. He feels like a demigod. He is a decider of fates, distributing crowns and erasing borders. It seems to him that the world lies at his feet, obedient and predictable. But while the legionaries scrape Jewish blood off their swords and scribes calculate the profit, a different mood is already ripening in Rome. The gold of the East that Pompey is bringing home was supposed to buy him the eternal love of the people and the Senate. He thinks he will return a hero for whom all doors will open. Naive. He doesn't know that in Rome, gold causes not only delight, but also envy. Monstrous, black envy. And while his ships, laden with treasures, prepare to sail for Italy, knives are already being sharpened in the marble halls of the Senate. Not iron ones, political ones. The suits in togas are preparing a warm welcome for their hero. Pompey's triumph will be the grandest show in history, but it is precisely with this that his fall into the abyss of political impotence will begin. Rome, late September of the 61st year before Christ. If you think you know what luxury is, forget it. You haven't seen Pompey's third triumph. It wasn't just a procession. It was a demonstration that the Roman Republic had become the mistress of the world. 2 days. For 2 whole days, the city was gridlocked with gold, ivory, and captive kings. They weren't just transporting loot through the streets, they were transporting the tax returns of half the inhabited world. Placards with the names of conquered nations: Pontus, Armenia, Cappadocia, Paphlagonia, Media, Colchis, Judea. The list was so long that the readers lost their voices shouting the names of the cities. Look at the chariot. Standing in it is a man who is 45 years old. He is at the peak of physical fitness and fame. On his shoulders is a cloak, but not simple Roman purple. He claims this cloak was found in the treasury of Mithridates, and that it belonged to Alexander the Great himself. Think about the level of this pride. Pompey pulls on the skin of antiquity's apex predator. He tells Rome without words, "I am the new Alexander." In this moment, he genuinely believes he has become a god. The crowd roars, pelting him with flowers. Veterans who have marched thousands of miles with him beat their swords against their shields. It seems there is no force in the world capable of stopping this colossus. But as soon as the chariot stops at the Capitol and the echo of applause dies down, Pompey commits an act that historians will call either nobility or the greatest stupidity. In the port of Brundisium, having just stepped onto Italian soil, he disbands his army. He sends the legions home. Why? He wants to show the Senate that he is not Sulla, that he is not a tyrant, that he is a loyal son of the Republic who returns his sword to its scabbard when the job is done. He expects the Senate to appreciate this gesture. He expects gratitude. He expects the fathers of the fatherland to meet him as a savior. What monstrous naivety. As soon as the last legionary handed in his weapon and went to his farm, Pompey ceased to be a threat. And in politics, if you aren't a threat, you are nobody. The Senate, that jar of spiders we talked about, breathed a sigh of relief. The wolf tore out his own fangs and came into the sheepfold asking for milk. And here, the most interesting part begins. The war hero who moved the borders of states with a wave of his hand faces an enemy that cannot be hacked down with a gladius: bureaucracy. Pompey comes to the Senate with two simple requests. First, ratify his orders in the East. He redrew the map there, appointed kings, created provinces. He needs Rome to stamp "approved" on it. Second, give land to his veterans. The soldiers shed blood for years. They earned their plots. This is standard practice. It is fair. But the Senate says no. Not directly, of course. Roman politicians are too cunning for a direct refusal. They start drowning Pompey in a procedural swamp. Meet Marcus Porcius Cato. Cato the Younger, the conscience of Rome, a stoic, a man who walks barefoot and wears no underwear to temper his spirit, and at the same time, a stubborn fanatic who hates everything that smells of one-man rule. Cato uses the filibuster tactic. When it's time to vote for Pompey's laws, Cato stands up and starts speaking. He speaks about virtue, about ancestors, about morality, about the weather. He speaks for an hour, 2, 5. He speaks until sunset. And by Roman laws, at sunset, all Senate sessions stop. The vote is postponed until tomorrow. And tomorrow, everything repeats. Imagine Pompey's humiliation. The man who forced kings to crawl in the dust sits on a hard bench and is forced to listen to endless lectures from a strange man in a worn toga. Pompey is a great organizer, but he is a bad orator. In the corridors, they start snickering at him. Cicero, that poisonous tongue of the Republic, calls him our Samarkand Pasha in his letters, hinting at his Eastern outfits and manners, which look ridiculous in Rome. It turned out that ruling an empire is easier than managing a meeting of 500 envious old men. Pompey is rich, incredibly rich. His fortune after the Eastern campaign is enormous, but he can't buy what he needs: respect and the law. His money doesn't work here because the Senate oligarchs are also rich, and their collective envy is stronger than any bribe. Lucius Lucullus, the general from whom Pompey essentially stole the victory over Mithridates, is now taking revenge. He teams up with Cato and the Metellus brothers. They block Pompey's every step. They demand that each of his decrees in the east be reviewed separately, and there are hundreds of such decrees. This is work for years. This is mockery. The veterans start to grumble. They sit in Rome's taverns drinking cheap wine and asking, "Where is our land, Commander? You promised." Pompey's authority melts like ice in the sun. He, the triumphator, finds himself in total political isolation. The great Gnaeus Pompey transforms into a private citizen who is laughed at behind his back. It was a cold shower. The icy water of reality washed away the gold dust of the triumph. Pompey realized, in Rome, they don't love heroes. In Rome, they love weak heroes. The Senate wanted to see him as a tame lion that roars on command and eats only from the hand. But Pompey isn't used to begging. His wounded ego begins to fester. He wanders through his luxurious estate, surrounded by trophies that now seem like useless junk to him. He is looking for a way out. He needs a battering ram to break through this wall of senatorial snobbery. He needs brute force, money, and popularity. But he doesn't have all of this in one bottle. And in this moment of despair, when the greatest general of the era feels cornered by political pygmies, fate tosses him a solution. A solution that will become a death sentence for the Republic. Pompey realizes, if the system doesn't work for him, he needs to break the system. But he can't do it alone. He needs allies, even if these allies are his sworn enemies. In the shadows of Roman porticos, whispers begin about strange meetings. Messengers run between three houses. Pompey is ready to sell his soul just to regain his influence. And buyers are found quickly. Thus, out of resentment, ambition, and cold hatred for the Senate, a monster begins to be born that will have 3 heads and that will devour Rome. But before the world learns of the 3-headed monster, we need to understand who the two are that agreed to shake the hand of the disgraced hero. One of them is the richest man in Rome, whose greed has become legendary. The other is a scandalous populist politician mired in debt, whom decent people avoid. Crassus and Caesar. The perfect company for the savior of the fatherland, isn't it? The 60th year before Christ. In Rome, it is assumed that politics is done in the forum, under the open sky, where the greedy crowd catches every word. Lies. Real politics is done in the dark, in closed rooms where the air is stale and wine is diluted not with water, but with the poison of intrigue. Imagine this scene, the last supper of the 3 most dangerous men in the world. They hate each other. If they met in an alley without witnesses, they would slit each other's throats. But today they are sitting at the same table. Why? Because the Senate, in its arrogant madness, drove them into the same corner. Let's look at the players in this game. On one side of the table is Gnaeus Pompey the Great, our offended hero. He has fame, he has veterans ready to kill for him, but his hands are tied. The Senate has turned him into a political impotent. Opposite him is Marcus Licinius Crassus, the richest man in the history of Rome, the walking wallet of the Republic. He owns half the real estate in the city. His fire brigades only put out houses after the owners sell them for pennies. But Crassus has a wound that won't heal. He envies Pompey with a black, corrosive envy. Crassus crushed Spartacus's revolt, but Pompey stole the laurels of the victor. They haven't spoken for years. And between them is Gaius Julius Caesar. Not yet that Caesar. Right now he is a junior partner, a brawler, a womanizer, mired in monstrous debts. His creditors are camped at the doors of his house. He needs power to get immunity from the courts, and money so as not to end up a beggar. He looks like a convenient puppet, energetic, brazen, popular with the rabble. It is Caesar who accomplishes the impossible. He takes the hands of Pompey and Crassus, hands that were reaching for sword hilts, and joins them in a handshake. Thus is born what the historian Varro will call the three-headed monster, the first triumvirate. Textbooks will tell you it was a political alliance. Forget it. It wasn't an alliance. It was a cartel. It was a criminal syndicate created with one goal: to privatize the Roman Republic. The deal was cynical to the bone. Pompey provides the muscle, the votes of his veterans. Crassus provides the gold, to bribe judges and voters. Caesar provides his name and energy. He will become consul and push through the necessary laws using street-fighting methods. They simply divided the state like a pie. "Land for the soldiers from me," says Pompey. "Tax breaks for the tax collectors from me," demands Crassus. "And from me," Caesar smiles. "I need a small province and an army for personal use for 5 years." Pompey nods. He thinks he has made the deal of the century. He gets everything he wanted without dirtying his hands. This upstart Caesar will do the dirty work. Pompey looks down on Julius. To him, Caesar is just a battering ram with which he will knock down the Senate doors and then throw away as unnecessary. Oh, how wrong he was. At this moment, Pompey the Great, the strategist who sees the battlefield 10 moves ahead, makes the most terrible mistake of his life. He personally signs the order to arm his executioner. Caesar becomes consul of the 59th year, and he doesn't let his partners down.
He turns his year of rule into a year of terror. His colleague in the consulship, the Senate's appointee Bibulus, is pelted with baskets of manure right in the forum. Bibulus locks himself in his house in terror and doesn't come out until the end of his term. Laws are passed not by voting, but by the shouts of hired gangs. Pompey gets land for the veterans, Crassus gets his money, and Caesar gets Gaul. Look at the map. Gaul at that time is a wild, scary forest full of barbarians. Pompey thinks he is sending Caesar into exile. Let him fight with savages, break his neck, or get stuck there for years, he thinks. Pompey wants to stay in Rome, enjoy the status of the first citizen, bathe in flattery and comfort. He is aging. He wants peace. He gives Caesar the most important thing: legions, and the right to recruit new ones. He gives him a sword, thinking that Caesar will be his attack dog. But a wolf will never become a dog. To seal the deal with blood, they resort to a method as old as the world. Pompey, a 50-year-old widower, takes Julia, Caesar's only daughter, as his wife. She is just over 20. This was supposed to be pure political calculation, a marriage by contract. But history loves paradoxes. Pompey, that dry cynic, falls in love. He falls in love with his young wife to the point of unconsciousness. She becomes his weakness, his tether. This love softens his heart exactly when he needs to be as hard as steel. He spends days at villas, walking with Julia in the gardens, while Caesar in Gaul tempers his army in blood and mud. While Pompey enjoys family happiness and the illusion of omnipotence, somewhere in the north, beyond the Alps, a death machine is beginning to be forged that will one day come for him. Caesar writes his commentaries, sending reports of victories to Rome that are read like adventure novels. His popularity grows. His soldiers get rich. They become loyal personally to him, not to the Republic. Pompey created a monster. But he still thinks he holds the leash in his hands.
He doesn't hear the cracks beginning to appear in the foundation of his power. The Triumvirate works. The Senate is crushed. Cato splutters with rage but can do nothing. The world is divided among three. It seems it will always be this way. An ideal balance of fear, money, and force. But any stool on three legs has a fatal flaw. Saw off one, and the whole structure collapses. And fate's saw is already raised. The empire froze in a fragile equilibrium. Three predators hold each other by the throats, smiling for the public. But time waits for no one. Death is already on their trail. And the first blow will not fall on politicians, but on the single thread that still connects the ambitions of Pompey and Caesar with something human. Fate has a cruel sense of humor. It often strikes where you don't wear armor. In the heart.
The 54th year before Christ. September. In one of Rome's luxurious bedrooms, a scream rings out that will echo on battlefields years later. It is not the scream of a soldier. It is the scream of a young woman. Julia, Pompey's wife and Caesar's daughter, dies in childbirth. The child dies with her, and with the child dies the last chance for peace. Look at Pompey in this moment. The great Magnus, the man whose name is carved on trophies of 3 continents, sobs like a boy. His toga is soaked not with the blood of enemies, but with the blood of the woman he loved. He wanted to take her body to his estate, hide his grief behind high walls, mourn her in solitude. But the people of Rome did not let him do this. The crowd, that unpredictable Roman crowd, snatched Julia's body and carried it in their arms to the Campus Martius. They buried her where heroes are buried. It was love, but for Pompey, it was torture. Caesar receives this news in Gaul.
He swallows the lump in his throat, writes a short, dry letter of condolence, and offers Pompey a new wife, his great niece. Let's replace one part of the mechanism with another, he seems to say. Cynical, cold calculation. But Pompey refuses. For the first time, he tells Caesar, no. The string connecting the two predators has snapped. Now they are separated not just by distance, but by a grave. But the three-headed monster had one more head. Marcus Licinius Crassus, the man who always felt like a third wheel at this celebration of military glory. Pompey had the east, Caesar had the west. Crassus only had money and envy. He was already over 60, but he decided he wanted to be Alexander the Great too. He needed his own triumph, his own war, and he chose Parthia. What a fatal, monstrous mistake. The 53rd year, the desert near the city of Carrhae. The heat melts brains. Crassus leads his legions straight into a trap. He thought the Parthians were just another bunch of barbarians who could be bought or intimidated. But the Parthians turned out to be ghosts of the desert. Their cataphracts, iron-clad horsemen, and mounted archers unleashed hell on the Romans. Imagine this nightmare. The Roman square stands under a hail of arrows that pierce shields and armor, pinning soldiers' hands to their bodies. The arrows never end. The Parthians have thousands of camels loaded with ammunition. It was a conveyor belt of death. Crassus sees his son die. He sees his army, the best infantry in the world, turning into a pincushion, unable to even get close to the enemy. The resolution of this drama is worthy of a horror movie scriptwriter. Crassus is killed during negotiations. His head is cut off. And here history intertwines with legend. They say the Parthian king, knowing of the Romans' legendary greed, ordered molten gold to be poured down his dead throat. You thirsted for gold in life. Drink your fill of it now. Crassus's head was sent to the royal court, where Euripides' tragedy, The Bacchae, was being performed. The actor playing the Mad Mother brought out the real head of Marcus Licinius Crassus onto the stage instead of a prop. The hall exploded with applause. The richest man in Rome ended his life as a prop in someone else's play. Crassus's death was a catastrophe. The three-legged stool lost a leg and collapsed. The buffer vanished. There was no one left to stand between Pompey and Caesar and say, "Calm down." Now they were one-on-one. Two alpha males in a cage called the Roman Republic. And Rome begins to go crazy. The 52nd year. The city plunges into anarchy. Elections are disrupted. Armed gangs rule the streets. Clodius and Milo, two political gangsters, stage a massacre right on the Appian Way. Clodius is killed.
His body is dragged to the Forum, carried into the Senate building, the Curia Hostilia, and burned right there, using senatorial benches and documents as firewood. The sacred place, the heart of Roman democracy, burns to the ground, along with the corpse of a street thug. It was a symbol. The old Rome is no more. There are only ashes. The senators are in a panic. The very suits who despised Pompey, who laughed at his peacock manners, now run to him, shaking with fear. "Save us!" they scream. "Only you can stop this chaos!" Cato, that stubborn Stoic who blocked Pompey's every law for years, personally proposes making him consul, and the sole consul at that. Think about the irony. The Senate, which feared tyranny more than anything in the world, hands Pompey dictatorial powers itself. They give him a sword to restore order, and Pompey restores it. His legions enter the city. Courts operate at spear point. Order is restored, but at what price? Pompey stands at the summit. He is the savior of the fatherland, and he makes his choice, the final choice. He turns away from Caesar and extends a hand to the old aristocracy. He marries Cornelia Metella, a young widow, the daughter of Metellus Scipio, a sworn enemy of the Caesarians. This is not just a marriage, it is a political declaration. Pompey tells Rome, "I am part of the system. I am the defender of tradition, and Caesar is a rebel." He is no longer a partner, he is a judge. Pompey passes laws that strike directly at Caesar. He demands that Gaius Julius return to Rome as a private citizen, without an army, to account for his actions. And in Rome, courts await Caesar. Wolves await him, ready to tear him apart for every violation of the law committed in his consular year. Pompey knows this. He knows he is cornering an old friend, but he is confident. Where is he going to go, Pompey thinks? I have the full might of the Republic. I have authority. I have Italy. He forgets one thing. A cornered rat bites hardest, and a cornered wolf rips out throats. The letters between them become colder. "Return the legions," writes Pompey. "I will return them if you lay down your arms too," answers Caesar. It is a dialogue of the deaf. No one wants to yield. To yield means to show weakness, and in their world, there are no weak ones. The weak are already dead, like Crassus. The air in Rome becomes thick with tension. People stock up on food. The rich send their families to country villas. Everyone understands. The storm is inevitable. The question is only when the first lightning will strike. Pompey, sitting in his office surrounded by flatterers from the Senate, believes he controls the situation. He once said a phrase that became famous. "I have only to stomp my foot on Italian soil, And from everywhere, from the fields and the cities, legions of infantry and cavalry will rise up. What a beautiful delusion. He believes in the magic of his name. He believes that past greatness is a currency that will never devalue. But while he revels in his power in Rome, to the north, at the border of Italy, stands a man who does not believe in words. He believes in speed, audacity, and the loyalty of his soldiers. Caesar stands by a small, dirty river separating his province from Italy proper. He looks at the murky water. His camp is quiet. The decision has not yet been made, but the dice are already in his palm, warm with sweat. Pompey is sure Caesar won't dare. After all, it is sacrilege. It is civil war. It is suicide. No one has attacked Rome since the time of Sulla, but Pompey forgot that he himself once taught Caesar, rules exist for winners to break.
The world froze in anticipation. The clock is ticking. In the Jerusalem temple, it is still just as empty and quiet, but the shadow cast by that void has already reached the banks of the Rubicon. January of the 49th year before Christ. Winter covered Rome, but in the Senate it was hot, like in Vulcan's forges. If you think civil wars start on battlefields, you are mistaken. They start with a piece of paper signed by the trembling hand of a bureaucrat. The Senate, intoxicated by Pompey's support, decides on a suicidal step. They pass the Senatus Consultum Ultimum, the ultimate decree. Its essence is simple and deadly. Gaius Julius Caesar is declared an enemy of the people if he does not lay down his arms immediately. Look at Pompey in these days. He sits in the front row, sprawling leisurely in a curule chair. He is calm, too calm. When one of the senators timidly asks, "Magnus, what if Caesar marches on Rome anyway?" "We don't have a ready army in Italy." Pompey merely chuckles. He utters words that will become the epitaph of his political career. "Do not fear," he says, lazily adjusting his toga. "I have only to stomp my foot on the ground of Italy, and legions will grow from it." What magnificent, monumental arrogance. He genuinely believes his name is a magic spell. He forgot that legions are made not of clay, but of people. And people want to eat, want money, and want to win. Pompey's veterans have aged, grown fat, and acquired grandchildren. But Caesar's wolves are hungry and mean. But Pompey doesn't see this. He lives in the 61st year, in the day of his triumph, while the calendar relentlessly shows the 49th. Meanwhile, 400 kilometers to the north, at a dirty, murky stream called the Rubicon, stands a man who has nothing to lose. Imagine the scene. Night. A cold wind from the Alps chills to the bone.
The 13th Legion, the only one Caesar has with him, stands in silence. Just 5,000 men against the entire might of the Republic. It is madness. It is mathematically guaranteed suicide. Caesar walks along the bank. Historians love to paint him in this moment as a decisive hero with a burning gaze. Nonsense. He hesitated. He understood that this step separated him from the status of a criminal by just 1 second. To cross the river with weapons means declaring war on the homeland. The penalty for this is execution, the cross, disgrace. But behind him is political death and courts. Ahead is a chance to become the master of the world or a corpse. "The die is cast," he says quietly. He doesn't shout. He simply states a fact, like a gambler betting his last money on zero. The legionaries enter the icy water. The Rubicon is crossed. The world has split in two. And then happens what Pompey didn't account for. Speed. Caesar doesn't march, he flies.
His soldiers cover 50, 70 kilometers a day. They take cities without a fight. Garrisons that were supposed to stop the rebels open the gates and join Caesar. Why? Because they see strength. And Rome loves strength more than the law. News reaches the capital faster than the wind, and here, in Rome, a scene worthy of a satirist's pen unfolds. "Caesar is coming!" This cry tears through the sleepy languor of the eternal city. Rumors multiply like a virus. They say he has 100,000 barbarians with him. They say his cavalry is already at the gates. They say he will slaughter everyone indiscriminately. Panic seizes the city. The senators, those proud fathers of the fatherland, who a week ago shook their fists at the north, now run around the forum like frightened chickens. They burst into Pompey's house, screaming, "Do something! Stomp your foot! Where are your legions grown from the earth?" And one of them, Favonius, sarcastically throws in the great general's face, "Well, Pompey, maybe it's time to stomp your foot?" This was the moment of truth. The soap bubble burst. Pompey realizes he bluffed, and his bluff was called. He has no army in Italy. The 2 legions at hand are unreliable, as they previously served Caesar. Pompey makes a decision that shocks everyone. "We are leaving." "What?" the consuls ask again. "We are leaving Rome?" "Rome is where I am," Pompey cuts them off. "We are evacuating." Can you imagine this horror? Rome, which didn't surrender even to Hannibal. Rome, which stood to the death for centuries, is now abandoned without a fight by its defender. It was a moral knockout. The Great Exodus begins. The Appian Way is jammed with carts. The rich abandon their villas, marble statues, libraries. They load gold, mistresses, and documents. The consuls run away so fast they forget the state treasury in the Temple of Saturn. Think about it. They leave the enemy money to wage war against themselves. What fantastic idiocy born of fear. Pompey rides in this crowd of fugitives. He is no longer Alexander. He is an old man who miscalculated his strength. He looks at the receding walls of Rome and, perhaps for the first time, realizes he will never return here. The city that applauded him now curses his name for cowardice. But in Pompey's head, through the panic and humiliation, the cold mind of a strategist begins to work. He understands he has lost Italy. But he has the East. His clients are there, his kings are there, the fleet is there, money is there. He decides to lure Caesar into a trap. Let him take an empty city, thinks Pompey. I will crush him later. I will gather an armada the world has never seen, and I will return. This is not flight, he tells himself. This is a strategic retreat. Pompey leaves Italy from the port of Brundisium, barely escaping Caesar's advance guard. He looks at the foamy wake behind the ship's stern. He is sailing to Greece, to where his fame once began, to where his fate must now be decided. A strange silence reigns in Rome. Caesar enters the city. No massacre, no heads on pikes. He declares a general amnesty. I am not Sulla, he says. He takes the treasury the consuls forgot, irony indeed, and distributes money to the people. The common people, who feared blood, now worship Caesar. And Pompey? To the Roman street, he became a traitor who abandoned them to their fate. Pompey gave Caesar not just territory. He gave him the moral right to be called the authority. The war is just beginning, but Pompey lost the first round completely. Not on the battlefield, but in people's heads. He went to sea, taking the Senate, laws, and legitimacy with him. But he left on the shore the thing without which one cannot rule, the heart of Rome. Now he faces a hard, exhausting war on foreign land.
and he doesn't even suspect that his famous strategy of attrition will become his own curse. After all, you can run from an enemy, but you cannot run from the shadow that stretches after you from the empty room of the Jerusalem temple. And this shadow is already covering the rocky shores of Greece. Greece, Epirus, the 48th year before Christ. If you think war is always the clashing of swords and heroic charges, look at the surroundings of Dyrrhachium. Here, war looks like a dirty, exhausting construction site. 2 giant snakes of earthen ramparts, ditches, and palisades have bitten into each other. 17 miles of fortifications. On one side is Caesar. He committed a crazy act. He ferried his army across the winter sea, slipping right under the nose of the Pompeian fleet. But now he is in a trap. He has no food. His soldiers, those iron veterans of Gaul, bake bread from some roots and grass. When this bread, looking like dried mud, is brought to Pompey, he grimaces in disgust. Who are we fighting? Men or wild beasts? On the other side is Pompey. He has everything. The fleet brings grain, wine, and meat from any point in the Mediterranean. His camp is bursting with supplies. He has a numerical advantage, 45,000 infantry against Caesar's 22,000. It would seem simple, just crush the hungry enemy. But Pompey hesitates. He builds walls. He plays mole war. Why? Because Pompey is a chess player, not a dice player. He doesn't want to risk it. He wants to strangle Caesar with hunger, force his army to decompose without a single battle. This is the strategy of a wise man. But war is not chess. Here, pieces sometimes come to life and hit you over the head with the board. Tension hangs in the air, thick as fog over the Adriatic. In Pompey's camp, the senators, the very ones who fled Rome, abandoning the treasury, are now whining. They are bored.
They are hot. They want to go home to their baths. They call Pompey Agamemnon, hinting that he is dragging out the war to enjoy the power of the King of Kings a little longer. These jabs hurt the old general's pride. He begins to doubt his strategy. And then a breakthrough happens. 2 Gallic commanders from Caesar's camp, caught stealing, defect to Pompey. Betrayal is the eternal companion of civil wars. They tell everything, where Caesar's weak spots are, where the wall isn't finished, where sentries sleep from hunger. Pompey strikes. It was a perfectly planned attack. A landing from the sea, an attack from land. Pompey's legionaries, fed and fresh, crash down on the exhausted cohorts of Caesar's 9th Legion. The defense crumbles like rotten cloth. Panic. The very panic that turns an army into a herd. Look at Caesar in this moment. He tries to stop those fleeing. He grabs a standard-bearer by the shoulder, turns him toward the enemy, and the man, crazed with fear, swings the sharp end of the staff at his commander. A bodyguard barely manages to chop off the traitor's hand. The great Caesar, conqueror of Gaul, nearly dies in the crush at the hands of his own soldiers. The front is breached. The road to Caesar's camp is open. There are no guards. It is the end of the war. Pompey just needs to give the command, forward. Walk another 1,000 steps, and Gaius Julius Caesar will become history. His army will be destroyed, the Republic saved, and Pompey will return to Rome a god. But Pompey stops. He stands on the rampart and looks into the dust cloud where the fugitives disappeared. He sees the open gates of the enemy camp, and he doesn't believe his eyes. His rational, cautious mind screams, "It's a trap!" Caesar, that tactical genius, cannot lose so ineptly. There, behind the gates, is surely an ambush. Hidden pits, stakes, death. "Halt!" the order sounds to the trumpeters.
Not a step further.
The legionaries stop in bewilderment. They smell victory, but the leash tightens. Pompey, the great tactician, the man who won all his wars, loses to himself at the decisive moment. He sees the ghost of defeat where the sun of victory shines. Meanwhile, Caesar, having reached his tent, sits with his head in his hands. He waits for the assault. He knows he is doomed. An hour passes. Another. Silence. There is no assault. Scouts report Pompey is withdrawing his troops. Caesar looks up. In his eyes is a mixture of disbelief and wild relief. He utters a phrase historians will record, a sentence passing judgment on his opponent. Today the victory would have been with the enemy, if they had anyone to win it. This was the moment when the wheel of fortune turned with a creak. Pompey didn't just miss a chance. He showed weakness. He showed that he fears Caesar, even when Caesar is lying in the mud. Luck, that fickle girl, does not forgive indecision.
On that day at Dyrrhachium, Pompey lost not a battle, he lost the war. Although formally he remained the winner. Caesar didn't wait for a second chance. He gathered the remnants of his ragged army and bolted away, to Thessaly. Away from the sea, away from Pompey's fleet. He needs space. He needs to maneuver. And in Pompey's camp, euphoria reigns. Caesar is running! We won! The senators are already dividing the consulships for the next year. They argue over who gets the house of the Pontifex Maximus, which Caesar occupied. They are dividing the skin of a bear that isn't killed, just wounded. Pompey, gloomier than a storm cloud, orders to strike camp and begin the pursuit. He is the only one who understands he made a mistake. He feels that chill in the pit of his stomach. He didn't finish off the beast. And now the beast, wounded and cornered, will fight with the fury of the doomed. The armies move east to the scorching valleys of Thessaly, to a place called Pharsalus. The name of this place means nothing to anyone yet, but soon it will become synonymous with catastrophe. Pompey rides surrounded by his retinue, but he is lonelier than ever. He knows fate will not forgive him a second mistake. And behind his back, like an invisible passenger on the horse's rump, sits that very void from the Jerusalem temple, patiently awaiting the denouement. The finale is close. Only the pieces remain to be placed on the final square. August of the 48th year before Christ. Thessaly, the plain of Pharsalus. The heat is such that the air shimmers over the burnt grass, distorting the horizon. But in Pompey's camp, the heat isn't from the sun. Collective madness is boiling there. Pompey doesn't want this battle. His plan is simple and brilliant, like a club blow: blockade. Caesar is running out of food. His soldiers are chewing roots. In a month, they will crawl to surrender themselves or scatter. Why risk everything when victory is already in the pocket? You just have to wait. But Pompey is no longer commanding the parade. He is a hostage of his retinue, those pomaded senators who filled his tent with noise and ambition. Domitius Ahenobarbus, Scipio, and Lentulus Spinther are no longer discussing strategy. They are dividing the skin of the unkilled Caesar. They argue over who will get his position of Pontifex Maximus. They fight over confiscated villas and future consulships. "Why are we waiting?" they shouted Pompey. "You are dragging out the war to soothe your ego. You want to be king over us." They call him a coward. They press on his sorest spot, his reputation. And Pompey, the man who once dictated terms to the kings of the East, breaks. He surrenders his position, not to the enemy, but to his own side. "You want a battle?" he says wearily. "You will get it." On the 9th of August,
The armies line up against each other. It is a grandiose spectacle. 7,000 of Pompey's horsemen, the flower of Roman and Italian youth, the golden elite, glittering in the sun with their armor. 45,000 infantrymen, a massive, heavy machine of destruction. Against them, 22,000 exhausted veterans of Caesar. Pompey's plan is as reliable as a hammer. All his giant cavalry is concentrated on the left flank. The task is elementary. Overturn Caesar's weak cavalry, get into the rear of the infantry, and stage a massacre. It is a classic move. Checkmate in 3 moves. But Pompey forgot who he is playing against. Caesar reads this plan like an open book. He sees this avalanche of horsemen ready to break off the chain, and he makes a move not described in any tactical textbook of that time. He takes the most experienced, meanest infantrymen from the rear lines, 6 cohorts, and hides them behind his cavalry. A 4th line, a secret reserve, an ace up his sleeve. "Don't throw pilums," orders Caesar. "Strike with spears at their faces, in the eyes." These pretty boys from Rome don't fear death. They fear ugliness. The battle begins. The earth hums. 7,000 of Pompey's horsemen break into a gallop. It looks like a tsunami of steel and flesh. They sweep away Caesar's pitiful handful of horsemen. Victory? It seems so. They start to turn to hit the legions in the flank. They already see the backs of their enemies. And then the trap snaps shut. From the cloud of dust, like demons from the underworld, a wall of infantry rises up. The 4th line. They don't throw spears. They strike with them, like pikes, straight into the faces of riders and horses. Imagine the shock. The Roman aristocracy, used to duels and beautiful maneuvers, encounters primal brutality. Image is everything to them. The thought of a scar on the face is scarier to them than the thought of defeat. Instead of fighting, they cover their faces with their hands. They yank the reins. Panic flows up instantly, like dry straw. The huge, clumsy mass of cavalry mixes into a heap. They crush each other. And they run. They run without looking back, abandoning the infantry they were supposed to protect. Pompey's left flank is exposed. Now Caesar's veterans are getting into the rear of the Pompeians. The meat grinder starts working in the opposite direction. And what about Pompey? Where is the great Magnus? He stands in the rear. He sees how the cloud of dust in which his victory was supposed to be born suddenly starts moving away. He sees the backs of his horsemen. In this moment, something switches off in him. Click, and the light goes out. Plutarch will write, "He became like a man deprived of reason by the gods." This is not just a defeat. It is the collapse of his worldview. His only bet, his signature strike, didn't work. He has no plan B. He has tens of thousands of infantrymen who are still fighting, who are dying for him right now. He could have led the center. He could have died sword in hand like a hero. Instead, he turns his horse and silently rides to the camp. He enters his tent, a luxurious pavilion decorated like a palace. He sits down and is silent. No orders, no attempts to save the army. He sits in prostration while the sounds of battle get closer. The screams of the dying mix with the triumphant roar of the Caesarians. "Have they reached the camp already?" is the only thing he says when enemies start chopping down the palisade. Pompey takes off his imperator's cloak, takes off his insignia. He sheds the persona of Pompey the Great like a snake sheds old skin. Now he is just a fugitive. He gets on a horse and, through the back gates, with a handful of servants, dissolves into the Thessalian dust. When Caesar's soldiers burst into Pompey's camp, they freeze in amazement. This is not a war camp. It is a resort. Gazebos covered in ivy, tables set with silver dishes, cups with wine prepared for celebrating victory, freshly baked bread. Everything was ready for a banquet. Caesar, walking past these tables, past the corpses of Romans lying amidst luxury, says bitterly, "They wanted this themselves. They would have condemned me, Gaius Caesar, as a criminal after so many victories, if I had not turned to the help of the army." Pharsalus became the grave of the Republic. 15,000 Romans remained lying on that field. But the main death happened not on the field. The myth of Pompey's invincibility died. The man who had not known defeat for 30 years ran away, abandoning his army like a captain jumping into the lifeboat first from a sinking ship. Now he is nobody, a ghost. He runs to the sea, to where, as it seems to him, he is still remembered and loved. He seeks salvation in the East. He thinks of Egypt. Oh, cruel irony. He thinks Egypt is a refuge. He doesn't know that Egypt is a scaffold. While the ship with the fugitive cuts the waves of the Mediterranean Sea, in Alexandria they already know the news. And there, in the shadow of the pyramids, the advisors of the underage king are already starting to sharpen their knives. For them, Pompey is not a guest, he is a problem. And problems in the East are solved quickly and drastically. The void from Jerusalem has finally caught up with him. It breathes down his neck. Very little is left. The last act of the tragedy will be played not to the thunder of fanfares, but to the quiet splashing of water by the Egyptian shore. September 28th of the 48th year before Christ. The coast of Egypt near Pelusium. On this day, Gnaeus Pompey the Great turns 58. What gift has fate prepared for him? A cake? A triumph? No. She prepared for him a small, rotten fishing boat and a knife in the back. After the nightmare of Pharsalus, Pompey runs not just from Caesar, he runs from reality. He is looking for a place where his name still sounds like thunder, not like a mockery. And his gaze falls on Egypt. The logic is ironclad. He, Pompey, was the guardian of the Egyptian throne. He, Pompey, once returned the throne to the father of the current king. Egypt owes him. Egypt is his client, his debtor, his backup airfield. But Pompey forgot that in politics there is no gratitude. There are only interests. While his ship drops anchor far from the shore, a meeting is underway in the tent of the young king Ptolemy the 13th. This is not a council of wise men. It is a club of snakes. Ptolemy is only 13. He is a puppet. Real power lies with 3 people, whose names will become synonymous with baseness. Pothinus, a eunuch and treasurer, sly as a fox. Achillas, a general of the Egyptian army. And Theodotus, a teacher of rhetoric. It is Theodotus, this master of beautiful words, who pronounces the sentence. He lays out the situation with the deadly cynicism of a school teacher solving a math problem. "Look," he says, rubbing his hands. "If we accept Pompey, we will anger Caesar, and Pompey will become our master. If we drive Pompey away, he will be offended, and, if he survives, will take revenge on us. And Caesar will come anyway." A dead end? No. Theodotus has a solution. If we kill him, we will please Caesar and won't have to fear Pompey. And he adds a phrase that will go down in history as the standard of political vileness. Dead men don't bite. The decision is made. The murder is approved like the budget for the next quarter. Pompey stands on the deck of his trireme. Next to him are his wife Cornelia and son Sextus. They look at the shore. They expect a royal barge decorated with gold, an honor guard, fanfares. But instead, a frail little boat pushes off from the shore. Several people are sitting in it. No pomp, no respect. Cornelia's heart clenches. "It's a trap," she whispers. "Gnaeus, let's leave. Raise the sails before it's too late." Pompey sees it too. His intuition, which slept at Pharsalus, now screams of danger. Why so modest? Where is the king? But in the boat, he notices a familiar face. Lucius Septimius, a former Roman centurion, a man who served under Pompey's command in the war against the pirates. One of his own, a veteran, a Roman. This calms the general. "Look, Cornelia," he smiles a forced smile. "There are my old comrades. Everything will be fine." He believes in the brotherhood of soldiers. He thinks a legionary will never raise a hand against his imperator. What a tragic mistake. Septimius is not here as a soldier. He is here as a hitman in the service of a eunuch. Pompey hugs his wife. This is their last embrace. Cornelia sobs, sensing trouble. Pompey descends into the boat. With him are only a couple of servants and the freedman Philip. The boat pushes off. It's quite a distance to the shore, and here begins the creepiest part of this drama. Silence. Grave silence reigns in the boat. The rowers work the oars rhythmically. The Egyptian general Achilles sits with a stone face. Septimius, the old comrade, averts his eyes. Pompey tries to defuse the situation. He seeks human contact. He leans toward Septimius and says, "I think I recognize you, comrade. Did we not serve together?" Septimius does not answer. He doesn't even look at his former commander. He simply nods dryly. Once. This nod is scarier than any insult. It is the nod of a butcher looking at a bull that needs to be stunned in a minute. Pompey understands everything. He falls silent. In his hands, he clutches a scroll, a speech he wrote for the meeting with King Ptolemy. He wrote it in Greek, honing every phrase to look dignified. Now this scroll seems like the most useless object in the world. The boat noses into the sand. People are standing on the shore, a crowd, but they don't welcome the hero.
They are silent.
Pompey starts to stand up. It is difficult for him. The sea swell and age take their toll. He reaches out a hand to the freedman for support. In this moment, when he is most vulnerable, when his back is open, Septimius takes a step forward. He doesn't challenge him to a duel. He doesn't read a sentence. He simply plunges a sword into the back of the man who was once his god of war. A blow. On the trireme, where Cornelia remained, such a terrible female scream rings out that, according to eyewitnesses, it was heard even on the shore. Pompey doesn't scream. He doesn't try to resist. He has no weapon other than a small dagger, which he doesn't even have time to use. In this second, old Roman pride wakes up in him. If one cannot live as a winner, one must at least die as a Roman. He pulls his toga over his head. He covers his face. He doesn't want these barbarians and traitors to see his death agony.
He doesn't want to see the world he built collapsing completely.
Achilles and Salvius, another conspirator, pounce on him with daggers. This is not an execution. This is a slaughter. They stab him again and again, turning the body of the greatest general of the era into a bloody mess right before the eyes of his family, who watch this in horror from the ship. The crew of the trireme, seeing this, panics and cuts the anchor cables. The wind, as if taking pity on Cornelia, fills the sails. The fleet leaves, leaving its admiral lying in the red foam of the surf. But death is not enough for the killers. They need proof. Septimius, this comrade in arms, takes a sword and saws off Pompey's head. The body, which once wore the cloak of Alexander the Great, now lies on the wet sand, stripped and headless. The Egyptians take the head. It is their trophy. It is their pass to the world of Caesar's mercy. And the body? The body is just abandoned. No one needs it. The great Gnaeus Pompey Magnus, three-time triumphator, conqueror of East and West, a man whose fortune exceeded the budgets of states, lies in the mud like a discarded fish. Only the old freedman Philip remains on the shore. He doesn't run. He washes the blood off his master's body with seawater. He has no money for a funeral pyre. He has no wood. He wanders along the shore and finds pieces of an old fishing boat, rotten, salty planks. Imagine this picture. Sunset. A huge red sun sets into the desert, and a lonely old man on the shore builds a tiny pyre out of trash to burn the body of the man Rome called the Great. This is a finale that makes the blood run cold, not because it is cruel, but because it is pathetic. Fate didn't just kill Pompey, it humiliated him. It trampled his greatness, showing that all the glory of the world, all the gold, all the legions, are not worth a plugged nickel when fortune turns its back on you. Pompey sought power over the world, but received a pile of rotten planks on a foreign shore. He entered the Holy of Holies to see God, and found emptiness there. And now this emptiness swallowed him whole, leaving of the new Alexander only a handful of ashes that the wind will scatter across the Egyptian desert. But history doesn't end there. Pompey's head still exists, and it is preparing for its last meeting. A meeting with the one for whom all this was started. Caesar approaches Alexandria. On October 2nd of the 48th year before Christ, a Roman flotilla enters the harbor of Alexandria. Standing on the flagship is Gaius Julius Caesar. He doesn't know what happened on the beach 4 days ago. He is still preparing for war. He thinks Pompey is fortifying the city, gathering troops, preparing traps. Caesar comes ashore in full combat gear, surrounded by lictors with fasces, symbols of Roman power. He walks on the land of the pharaohs, not as a guest, but as a master. The Egyptians meet him on the pier, but instead of an army and barricades, a delegation of courtiers awaits him, led by that same Theodotus, the rhetoric teacher who invented the ingenious murder plan. Theodotus smiles, the smile of a man who is sure he just hit the jackpot. He holds a basket covered with cloth. Nearby, a servant carries something small wrapped in silk. "Great Caesar," starts Theodotus in an oily voice, "we have spared you the need to dirty your hands. We have ended your war." He pulls off the cloth. The world freezes. In the basket lies a head. It has already begun to change under the scorching Egyptian sun, but these features are impossible not to recognize. Gnaeus Pompey the Great, the man whose face was minted on coins from Spain to Syria. The eyes are half open, the mouth twisted in a final grimace of pain and surprise. The hair, those famous locks he styled like Alexander the Great, are matted with blood and sand. Theodotus waits for applause. He expects Caesar to laugh, slap him on the shoulder, and shower him with gold. But Caesar recoils. This is not a theatrical gesture. It is a physiological reaction. He turns away from the basket in horror. His face, usually the impenetrable mask of a poker player, twists in a grimace of disgust. In this moment, he sees before him not an enemy. He sees the husband of his deceased daughter, Julia. He sees an old friend with whom he shared bread and power. He sees a consul of the Roman Republic slaughtered like cattle by foreign slaves. For a Roman, this is not a gift. It is an insult. It is a spit in the face of all of Rome. Pompey might have been an enemy, but he was a Roman. Only another Roman could defeat him. The Senate could have judged him. A legionary could have killed him in a fair fight. But to be stabbed in the back by an Egyptian eunuch on a rotten boat, it is sacrilege. It is a violation of all laws, divine and human. Theodotus turns pale. His smile slides off like a poorly glued mask. He realizes he miscalculated. Fatally. Instead of gratitude, a cold, deadly rage flares up in Caesar's eyes. The servant with trembling hands holds out the second object, Pompey's personal signet ring. Carved on the stone is a lion holding a sword. Caesar takes the ring. He looks at it, and tears flow down the cheeks of the toughest man in antiquity. Historians will argue, were these tears sincere? Is he a hypocrite? Number. In that moment, Caesar cried not only for Pompey, he cried for himself. Looking at this severed head, he saw a mirror of his own fate. He realized, at the pinnacle of power, you are absolutely alone, and there are no guarantees. If Pompey the Great could be thrown onto the trash heap of history just like that, then what awaits him, Caesar? Irony of fate. 23 knife wounds await him from those he considered friends just 4 years later. The cycle of violence they launched will devour them all. Take that away, Caesar orders quietly, but so that the palace walls tremble. He refuses to look at the head. He orders the execution of the killers. Pothinus and Achilles will soon pay with their heads for their service. Theodotus will run, wander for years, until he is caught and crucified, according to another version, burned, by Brutus's soldiers. Fate will find everyone. Caesar arranges a magnificent funeral for Pompey. He burns the head with honors worthy of a king and builds a temple to Nemesis, the goddess of retribution, on that spot. What symbolism! A temple of vengeance on the grave of friendship. But along with the smoke of the funeral pyre, something more than the soul of one general goes up into the sky. On that day on the Egyptian shore, the Roman Republic finally died. Pompey was the last barrier, the last counterweight. Yes, he was weak. Yes, he was vain. But he represented the system, the old order. With his death, the scales broke. Now nothing remained on one side. On the other, only Caesar. The Republic, that complex mechanism of checks, balances, elections, and vetoes, turned into a fiction. The era of the empire was beginning, an era where the will of one man is more important than the law. Pompey wanted to save the Republic, but with his death, he only cleared the foundation for the throne of emperors. He lost all battles, but paradoxically, his death made a return to the past impossible. And now let's return to where it all started, to Jerusalem, to the 63rd year. Remember that silence in the Holy of Holies. Remember how Pompey, young, strong, daring, pulled back the curtain and smirked, seeing emptiness. He was looking for a god there who could be touched, a golden idol that could be carried away. He didn't understand then that this void is not the absence of something. It is the presence of the inevitable. Then, in the temple, he violated a certain cosmic balance. He crossed the line separating man from eternity, and eternity looked back at him. Pompey's entire life after that day is a slow, agonizing slide into that very void. First, luck left, then family left, then allies left, then the army left, then fame left, and finally, on the banks of the Nile, even his body was taken from him, leaving only a name and ashes. The circle has closed. The curse of Jerusalem, if it existed, worked with surgical precision. The God who has no image and no name proved to the Roman pragmatist that power is not legions and not gold. Power is what remains when everything material turns to dust. Pompey the Great became simply Pompey, a man who ran faster than everyone, but could never outrun his own shadow. His tragedy is a lesson to everyone who thinks they can grab history by the throat. History always bites back. Caesar stands on the terrace of the palace in Alexandria. He looks at the sea. He won. He is the sole master of Rome. But in the pocket of his toga, burning his fingers with the cold of gold, lies the ring of a dead friend. And this ring weighs more than the whole world. Caesar doesn't know yet that his own timer is already ticking, that the Ides of March are already approaching, that the void which swallowed Pompey is hungry and demands a new victim. But that is a completely different story. And for now, the waves of the Mediterranean Sea wash traces of blood from the sand, and the wind covers with sand the place where lay the one who was called the New Alexander. Sic transit gloria mundi. Thus passes the glory of the world. And only silence remains. That same ringing silence that lives behind the veil of the temple.